Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I am Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock.
It's too late for us to be recording. I genuinely got like the welcome in and then to my name and almost blanked. It's like I'm somebody.
Steve Gibson, but who is Steve Gibson? Really? It's just a name.
I've been trying to answer that question for nearly 40 years.
It's funny. It's just a name. That's related kind of what I'm going to talk about today. Welcome to the
There's a good chance you came across my family. There's a lot of us out there.
Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. If you don't know what the show is, every week we just tell each other stories. They could be about fucking whatever. It is funny. We're getting to the October time of the year. And I remember this happened last year too, where you started to get pretty excited about it. Because, you know, our show tends to dive into a lot of spooky, eerie shit.
Yeah, paranormal stuff, anyway. Creepypasta, cryptozoology stuff. Yeah, like
a very Halloween-themed show pretty much every week out of the year.
Except October.
And then October comes and it's like the last thing I want to talk about for some reason. So we'll see what happens this year, but this week, definitely not a Halloween-style story. Today we're going to talk about a mobster, Dutch Schultz.
Good old Dutch Schultz.
That's a name that if you're like, I enjoy mob movies and I enjoy mob stories and I watch a lot of documentaries and shit about these guys. Dutch Schultz was a name I've heard a million times because he's connected into that whole Luciano era of like bootlegging mobsters in like the 1920s, 1930s. But I never fucking knew anything about him. And the only reason I got enough material for today's story was because his death was interesting.
Well, those are the best stories, though. Like we've had a handful of those where their life, they're like, yeah, it's kind of neat, and then they die and like, oh, he drowned in a toilet on a cruise ship. Yeah.
Well, nothing that cool. How he was killed is pretty standard to the mob formula, but how he died was kind of interesting. But we got to tell his whole story before we can get to that. Call it eating your vegetables before dessert, folks. Where a man dies. So Dutch Schultz was born Arthur Flagenheimer in 1902.
I can see why he changed his name.
Exactly. So you kind of learn right away that some nicknames are pretty much mandatory based on what field you enter.
Yeah, imagine trying to intimidate a guy. You show up, you've got your like Tommy gun and your hat pulled down low so your eyes are all in shadow, and it's like, who are you? And you're like, I'm Flagenhammer.
Well, what? Like Flagenheimer sounds like a scientist who would be responsible for a nuclear disaster somewhere. But if you change your name to Dutch Schultz, you're pretty much guaranteed to get into some gangster shit.
Right.
So Dutch grew up in the slums of the Bronx. His parents were German immigrant Jews, but his dad bailed on the family when Dutch was just a teenager. His mom did people's laundry to get by, and Dutch dropped out of school to work some small, just random jobs here and there. But with most stories that we've kind of covered on this show where people kind of have to grow up in this environment, it's not hard to imagine that a desperate, impressionable young man would start to become raised by this seedy, impoverished, criminal-fed environment. So Dutch joined a small gang pretty early on, and he started his career with petty thefts and burglaries. And eventually he was arrested at the age of 17, where he would serve 17 months in prison for burglary.
I've always kind of wondered, just to sidetrack a little bit, because all these stories, not all of them, but a lot of them start the same way. You know, they're either they've run away from home or they're single parents, or even, you know, both parents are around, but they're just, you know, destitute. And it's like, and then he fell in with a gang. It's like, how does that happen? Like, You're just standing there talking to some guy one day, and you're like, "Oh, those are some nice shoes." And he's like, "Thanks, I got them in this gang."
I mean,
it's
you
like,
make some friends, and one of them goes one day, "Hey, you want to do some crimes?" And if more than one person says yes, then you have a gang now.
Yeah, it's one of those safe things, because if you're in a group of guys and you say that, and they say yes, you got a gang. If they say no, you say, "I was just kidding."
I'm just fucking around.
But I'm going to start hanging out with these other people, and if crimes start happening, it's not us.
Yeah, I mean, but cops might ask you questions, and, if you're my bro, you'll keep your fucking mouth shut. To Dutch's credit, this would only be the only prison time he would ever do in his life. When he got arrested, he gave the cops the fake name of Charles Harmon. But when he left the prison, he somehow came up with the new moniker Dutch Schultz. Later in life, he would joke that he chose the name just because Flagenheimer was too long for newspaper headlines, which I would go the other way, where I'd make my nickname even longer. Fuck newspapers.
Well, it's not even just the newspapers. Like, the FBI would never, because they'd be like, put out
I'm gonna make
APB
sure
for Flugenheimer, Schwimmer. Never mind. Yeah, right. Like, fuck it, I'm not doing this.
Yeah. A 3-page nickname. Out of prison, Dutch would start his own gang with another criminal named Joey No. In the 1920s.
How does that work? Is like, you want to rob a bank? No.
Nah.
How about
he's just
start a numbers racket? Nah.
He's just Eeyore of the criminal world. No, I don't want to. In the 1920s, the pair ran a bootlegging operation for New York City saloons. This was during Prohibition, so they used coercion, kidnapping, and torture to make sure rival club owners bought exclusively from his gang.
Your classics.
Yep. Now, it might surprise you that a prominent mob figure like Dutch had a short, violent temper. He would easily resort to violence to solve most of his problems, like when he killed, supposedly, his good friend, a man named Jules Modulewski, who would get the sad nickname of Julie Martin. Everybody else got the cool nicknames. This guy had Julie Martin, and he got shot in the mouth for skimming ill-gotten gains from shaking down restaurateurs.
You like to take extra from a restaurant? Well,
and I would totally just be like, dude, I'm a fucking criminal. You knew that when you hired me.
Right.
But violence was kind of how you built up your operation back then. If you were in, the mob world, you had to be violent. Otherwise, you were a pushover.
Well, right. It was like, it's that kill or be killed. I mean.
And it was kind of this weird balancing act of like, you had to be tough enough to handle yourself against other gang operations. But if you became too big and too violent, that's when you started to get the government's attention. Yeah,
or you became like
or you just got rich.
Yeah, if you become too much of a problem and people are too scared of you, that also paints a target on your back, though. I mean, like you said, there's a kind of a fine line of violence there.
Right. So, after a while, Dutch and Joey's little gang was starting to actually become a formidable Jewish mob. Dutch was looking to expand the operation past the Bronx to the lucrative side of New York across the river to Manhattan, where Italian gangsters pretty much exclusively ran shit. Manhattan was the current turf of another famous mobster with a great nickname, Legs Diamond. And I swear to God, I'm not making these up. It sounds like I'm making up names.
You got to be really careful not to confuse it with Diamond Legs, who
was a very weak-willed man, didn't last long in the mob. And when Legs Diamond saw these supposedly small-time gangsters coming into his business on his turf, he ordered a hit on Joey No, which was carried out in October of 1928. At least some believe that Dutch Schultz responded to the murder of his friend and business partner by killing Diamond's close associate and maybe more well-known crime boss, Arnold the Brain Rothstein. At least anybody who watched Boardwalk Empire knows Arnold Rothstein.
Like, there really is a mobster for every body part, isn't there? Like, was there Jimmy the Spleen?
If they all could have come together, they would have formed like a Power Rangers robot.
Damn it, I told you I didn't want to be Andy the Anus.
Well, somebody has to do it, all right? And you work Jersey, so you get the butt. So Rothstein lived for 2 days after he was shot, but he refused to ever identify his killer to the police. He told them on his deathbed, you stick to your trade, I'll stick to mine.
Dying.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, that's, the fucking Godfather type, dramatic shit that people want to believe about the mob. The real reality is that happens today. Any fucking criminal singing. Because it's just that fucker killed me and those two wanted to. Put him in jail. I'm fucking dying.
That's the thing. That's what I was going to say. I'd implicate every one of my enemies, even the ones that had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I would at least pick out the one I hated the most and try to get him life.
It was your third grade science teacher? Yes, that asshole.
Yeah. I was never the same since he flunked me. So this is where kind of the story, the fiction, kind of blends with the history here, because the truth is, Arnold Rothstein had no shortage of enemies in his life. He had a lot of enemies and a lot of debts by the time he died. So Schultz was a totally plausible culprit, but far from the only theory of why Arnold got shot.
Which is probably why he wasn't immediately arrested, because there was no...
Yeah, I touch on it a little bit later, but American mobsters kind of have the same, we were talking about reputation and violence. And mobsters kind of had the same thing going for them as Old West gunslingers, where it's I'm not going to deny a story that makes my legend bigger.
Right.
I might not come out and confirm it, but if the streets want to say I killed Arnold Rothstein, who am I to argue?
Well, plus it kind of all goes back to that. If you start saying, no, I didn't, it makes it look like you're afraid of,
Yeah, you kind of just let the word spread organically. And again, Dutch was violent enough as hell and organized enough to totally carry out this hit. It's just, there's a lot of people who also could say the same thing. Diamond and Dutch would be locked in a turf war for a few years until it said Dutch finally got the opening he needed in 1931. Diamond, at the time, was on trial for kidnapping and was staying at a rooming house in Albany, New York. That night, he went out to eat, and then came back.
Isn't it nice when you can be on trial for kidnapping and be like, let's go get some dinner?
Yeah, I would, man, being rich must be really fucking cool. So he went out to eat, visited his mistress at approximately 1 a.m., and got back to his rooming house at 4:30. So just the dude was clearly not keeping a low profile. The fucking trial was in the news everywhere, and he's just going around town. He passed out in his bed, and two men entered an hour later. One man held Diamond down while the other shot him 3 times in the back of the head, which, I mean, how bad of a fucking shot do you have to be to need somebody to hold down a sleeping guy?
Well, that was Larry Shaky Arms Ferguson or something.
Right. Jeffrey Jitters. We called him Jitters because he couldn't fucking hit a sleeping man. Again,
that's the part you left out. They shot him 3 times in the back of the head, but 8 times in the bed, all around.
But he shot himself 3 times.
Fuck it, my foot again.
A man holds a sleeping dude down, and you accidentally shoot yourself in the head 3 times. Again, Dutch is the primary suspect for this hit. But it's also important to remember that Diamond had been shot at least 5 times in the previous 7 years. Like, a lot of people hated that guy too. So while I can definitely see Dutch pulling it off, even if he were innocent, it probably wouldn't benefit him that much to say he was innocent.
Did he at least steal his diamond legs? Like,
turns out they were fake. They were Fugazi legs.
Ah, damn it.
You know, and like we talk about it like, oh, it cements your reputation, but you have to understand, like, the reason why reputation was so important and expanding your empire was so important to these guys. If you were in the bootlegging world, you made so much fucking money off of alcohol. It's insane. So, like, by 1928, a few years before Diamond was dead, Dutch was bringing home estimated about $54,126 per month, which would translate to about $780,000 a month today. So
yeah, it's a pretty nice paycheck.
Pretty fucking nice. Makes me want to do something illegal.
But the thing is, nice. You hear all these stories and they like make all this money, but you never live long enough to like. They sure as hell enjoyed it while they were alive. Obviously, that's why they get all these like movies about them, and they're always at the clubs like throwing money around and whatever.
We're talking about them now.
But that's why it was a short-term living like extravagance and not a retirement plan, because very few of them retired.
Yeah. But making that much money, it also put crosshairs on you from other gangs in the government. Following his battle with Diamond, Dutch would get into another gang war with a former associate named Vincent Mad Dog Cole. This war drove Dutch fucking crazy. It went on way too long in his mind, and he and another crime boss named Oni Madden had put a $50,000 bounty on Cole. At one point, it was pissing him off so much that they couldn't kill this fucker that Dutch walked into a police station and offered a house in Westchester to whoever killed the fucking guy. He told that to a bunch of cops.
Cops, yeah.
He was like, so what a time to be alive when you could march into a police station and treat them all like you're fucking Craigslist hitmen.
And they probably scrambled the squad cars.
There's probably a few that were like, hey, we got to get them.
Now, is this... Maybe this just shows how naive I am, or maybe, like, I'm a psychopath, but if there's just one person out there that you need to kill, that you want to kill that badly, it doesn't really seem that hard to do it. Like, because these people, like you said, they don't generally keep that low of a profile.
Well, but some do. That's the thing. Like, Legs got sloppy, and like there are some people who like they build up their reputation too much that they kind of just feel like they're fucking bulletproof, and they can go do whatever they want. No one would dare like do anything to them in public that. But usually that wasn't true. Most of the people who thought that way died. More people, more often than not, guys, they kept enough of a profile to keep doing their operation, but they couldn't pin down where these guys were at any given point. So it's like, well, there's rumors that he like goes into this restaurant, he might be there, but you know, they can never just lock it down to like, oh, it's not like movies and shows where it's like, oh, he eats there every Thursday at noon. You know, it's right. Most of the time, like they had enough sense about him to be like, we are in a war. We eat in the office today.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of those guys too, it's not like they would go out by themselves.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard to convince somebody.
Muscle, yeah.
Yeah, and it's hard to convince somebody to be like, hey, go take this guy out, knowing that means you're also going to get
like one thing in the movies and shit that is true is most of these guys had bodyguards and lookouts everywhere they went.
Right.
And it doesn't look cool in the movies, but most of the time those guys would be on alert and you wouldn't be able to just like drive by with Tommy guns. Which is really funny that I'm saying all this, and then we'll get to how Cole did die. On February 1st, 1932, well, this is a little before that, but on February 1st, 1932, a gunman approached a Bronx apartment that Cole was rumored to be frequenting at, and they shot the place up. 2 of Mad Dog's gangsters and a bystander were killed. Cole would show up a half an hour later. Sort of just fucking whistling, you know?
Hey, guys. Yeah, sorry, I had an extra long dump this morning. What's that? Oh, no.
Ooh, shit, that was for me? You could say he was lucky, but he kind of pissed that luck away a week later when he called Oni Madden from a phone booth outside a drugstore. He was demanding $50,000 under the threat of kidnapping Oni's brother-in-law, which I'm not even a mobster. I know you can't ransom a hypothetical kidnapping.
And usually not a brother-in-law. It's like...
Well, you might maybe a brother-in-law, but you can't say, like, hey, I might kidnap him. Like, you have to do shit.
Yeah, that sounds like one of those cases where he was, fuming about the attempted hit, and he was drinking, and he thought this was a real great idea, so he called him up, but he was smashed. And he's like, if you don't give me $50,000 right now, I might kidnap, I don't know, your brother-in-law.
Who the hell do you like? I don't even know who you like, but I'll take him. Madden kept Cole on the line while the call was traced. Yes, even back then they could trace the line. And 3 men in a dark limousine soon arrived at the location. One stayed in the car, another stood watch outside, and the third went inside and told the cashier, "Keep cool now." And then he drew a Thompson submachine gun from his coat and opened fire on Cole from the store to the glass booth.
So that's like the extreme version of like, you got to promise you don't get offended when I say this next thing. And it's always offensive. Yeah. Be like, keep cool now. Cool, and then you whip out a fucking Tommy gun. It'll scar you for the rest of your life, but don't panic.
Yeah. Play it cool while I do the least played cool thing you can do, where you spray bullets into a street.
I like to think that, like, the guy's like, yes, sir, I'll keep cool, sir. And he was just doing that old-timey thing where he was just, like, rubbing the countertop with a cloth, like soda jerkster or something, like just trying to act natural as the window's getting blasted out behind him.
I would be in shock, but I would also be like, if you're working a store, you would think you were being robbed when somebody pulls a gun out like that, and then they just shoot some dude outside and then leave. I would totally be like, why'd you come in here to do that?
Yeah, I know. That's interesting. Like, why wouldn't you just I guess if you walk up to the phone booth, there's a chance that he sees you coming and draws his own weapon or something. But still, that seems like a much more straightforward plan than like, I'm going to walk into this building, then shoot through the window at him.
Yeah.
But I like to think, too, that the cashier, like, afterwards, like, took all the money from the cash register and put it in his pocket. So when the cops get there, be like, yeah, he shot this guy and then robbed us. He's got the money, not me.
So the shooters were able to escape, and Cole had 15 bullets removed from his body. At his funeral, Dutch sent a floral wreath that had a banner on it that said, "From the boys." I hate the boys. They got me killed. Again, Dutch never got legally charged with this murder, but very probably could have done it, maybe.
Well, that's the other thing, that they get other people to do the murder. And not that it's not illegal to order somebody to do the hit, but it makes it harder to pin on you when you're not physically there. Although it sounds like maybe he was physically there, but
he could have been.
But a lot of times,
You're certainly not above killing people himself, but once you're high enough, you usually don't have to.
Wait, I got another important question that's just kind of, did they have somebody holding him down in the phone booth too?
Fucking Jeffrey Jitters. It's like, play it cool, man. I'm a little nervous myself.
It was Barney Fife. It's the problem.
Like, drops the gun, and then the gun like hits the ground and sprays bullets and kills the guy. It's like, oh shit!
They're like, good job, Jitters. You got him with 15 times. It's like, yes, I did that on purpose.
Damn, Jeff, who knew you can hit a shot?
How would you like to be the guy nominated to hold the person while Jitters shoots at him too?
Fucking,
you're like, damn it!
No job security there.
No.
So yeah, Dutch never got legally charged with it, but probably was at least somewhat involved. But like all good criminals, you can pretty much kill all the fuck you want in America. But the moment you stop reporting your bullshit income, that's when Uncle Sam will kick you in the dick.
Yeah.
At this point, Schultz was not just bootlegging. He was into the illegal gambling market, running a series of slot machines and a lottery for a few years before being indicted on tax evasion in 1933. He went into hiding, but would turn himself in on November of 1934. There were some rumors that he was getting his affairs in order for this trial, but by affairs, I mean the rumor is that he filled a steel box with millions of dollars and hid it somewhere up in Esopus Creek near Phoenicia, New York.
Okay. I'll be right back. I got something I got to do real quick.
People still look for this treasure. There is no treasure. I don't know that, but I know that.
Not to sidetrack it too much, and I think we've talked about it before because we've talked about treasures and lost money before. My thoughts are usually if somebody does that, they're at least telling like somebody. I don't know if he had a wife or a mistress, or usually somebody else knows. So like the second that he's out of the picture, like nobody's like, well, that's his money though, we'll just leave it laying there. Like,
right. Yeah, I mean, you didn't hide that shit because you were going to come back for it. Like, usually if people hide a lot of money, it's like, maybe they can come back for it, but it's more like if you had like a wife or some shit, you would be like, I hid money there. You won't be able to use it, but it's there.
I could see the theory that you'd hide it knowing that when you go to trial for tax evasion, they're going to search everything and seize whatever they can.
That is true. If you got put away, they would take what you did have on record.
So when you got out, you'd have the stash, but...
Yeah. But, I mean, also, he didn't bury the money alone. Even the rumors say he went there with, like, bodyguards and shit.
Well,
and
right.
It's like,
and
if
that's
they know where your money is, fuck you. You ain't getting it.
And that's the same as these pirate stories we talk about, because nobody sails to an island by themselves and then buries something and then sails away. There's other people with them. And I know, like, a lot of it's like, oh, but they had them all killed. It's like, well, you can't kill your entire crew. I mean, I guess you could, but then it's hard to hire a second crew because they're like, nope. So the second that you were part of this pirate crew that didn't get arrested and you heard the pirate got hanged, you're like, well, I'm going on a vacation to this island. I'll be right back. Like, somebody would find a way to get to the treasure. Yeah. But what do I know?
All right, so yeah, probably not treasure, but maybe treasure. Go find out. Email us. Let us know if you find it. Dutch stood trial twice, but 2 juries could not convict him. Dutch kind of had like a lot of mobsters did back then, a bit of a Robin Hood thing with the community where it's like you're technically robbing them blind, but you're giving so much back at face value that everybody's like, he's the best. And
especially since you kind of make it look like you're robbing the wealthy, and people don't care, but you're really not, because you're, like you said, you're really hurting the communities itself. But as long as you give something back, and a lot of gangsters did that, and some of it was because they cared about their community, because some of these people did, I mean, they have their own code of ethics, but I think a lot of it was a survival thing too, like you said.
It's a lot like, Wall Street people and entrepreneurs and shit in America, like successful rich people in America today. A lot of them, I'm willing to believe, don't understand just how much they're hurting society through their business practices and actions and shit. And they would be the first ones to be like, well, look how much I give to charity. And it's like, you know,
but the charity is only needed because
like if you guys, you know, were like proportionally wealthy to the economic health of your society, then you wouldn't have to give that much to charity, because the world would just run better. But that's my soapbox. Anyway, so Dutch had this, you know, kind of Robin Hood thing going. The community loved him. But the person who didn't love him was New York Special Prosecutor Thomas E. Dewey, who thought this was a bullshit turn of events. One of these juries should have fucking convicted him, and he wasn't planning on just letting Schultz walk away. And
can you imagine how frustrating that has to be too? Because you know the court case is like, so you're this guy, right? And they're like, yeah. And they're like, and this is your gambling establishment. It's like, yeah. And it's like, and this is how much money you made. It's like, yep. And you paid no taxes. It's like, right. And it's like, so you're guilty. And they're like, no.
Nah.
Like, what? You're like pulling your hair out. You're like,
it's like, God damn it. You know, this time he was going to prosecute Dutch for his illegal lottery. And on October of 1935, Dutch got indicted again. And at this point, he was furious. Which I don't really know why. Maybe because it's just annoying, but it's like, it seems like you're getting off every time.
This is triple jeopardy, man.
Like, you know, you're not Capone at this point. You seem to be doing okay. But, you know, he was furious. He fucking hated Thomas E. Dewey, which it's a very hateable name. It certainly is no Dutch Schultz.
Yeah.
And at this point, it's kind of important to acknowledge the sort of mob interrelationships at this point, where Dutch wasn't friends with a lot of people, but they were all kind of under the commission. And the commission was headed up by Lucky Luciano. The whole idea was that it was like a group of these mob families sort of agreeing together and making decisions as a committee. But it was
really like a homeowners association for mob families.
But but it's all bullshit, because it's like at the end of the day, you knew Luciano ran it, you know?
Right.
Dutch was far from a friend of Luciano's at this point. The two had conflicting business interests. You know, so they didn't really like each other. But Dutch still needed the commission's permission to have Dewey killed. When he asked, the commission was with no shortage of influence from Luciano, who was like, you know, fuck this guy. The commission was kind of like, this dude's a New York special prosecutor. If you kill him, that's going to bring a ton of heat on us. Fuck no. You know, it was very much a sorry for your troubles, but this has nothing to do with us.
Right.
So no, you can't have the fucking prosecutor killed. And, you know, Luciano was like, you know, he was like, hey, if fucking Dutch gets put away or whatever, then I make more money. So fuck it.
Well, right. That's the other thing too, is you wonder how much they actually cared about, like, not having this guy killed, and how much he was like, I kind of want you to go to jail. Like,
Dutch didn't give a shit and ended up putting the hit out on Dewey for himself, which Luciano was like, you know, the only thing better than Dutch going to jail is if we kill him and then he never comes back. And even if Luciano wasn't kind of pulling the strings and influencing things, if you watched Goodfellas or any mob story, really, you know how unauthorized hits tend to work in the world of the mob. If you go trying to pull off a hit behind the organization's back, you're probably going to get killed yourself. And that's what happened to Dutch. So you may have heard the name Murder, Inc. It was the notorious enforcement arm of basically all the mafias back then. They worked for fucking everyone, it seemed like. Any crime group in New York City and really anywhere the mob had a presence. And they were vicious bastards, and the commission decided to send some of those guys after Dutch.
See, now that's the job if you have no qualms about killing. Like,
That's the
like
job for
I
me.
wouldn't want to have to deal with all the like inner politics of like the mob and running all these numbers stuff. You want to be the badass, like just the hit squad that comes in. Again, I wouldn't want to be because I don't want to murder people, but like that
it's a
seems
very
like the
straightforward
way.
life.
Yeah, I mean, you're Agent 47 basically.
Not even that. You don't even have to work that hard. Like a lot of those Murder Inc. guys were fucking fat, out of shape.
They were just the ones that were willing to kill people.
Yeah, but you give them a Tommy gun, it didn't fucking matter. On October 23rd, 1935, 2 Murder Inc. gunmen entered and shot Dutch right below the heart in the bathroom of Newark's Palace Chop House restaurant.
In the bathroom. That's the thing.
Yeah,
I'd be like, if you're gonna murder me, anywhere but the fucking bathroom. Like,
it is. Remember what I said about at the beginning. This is about not how he was killed, but how the man died. So it's really funny you said that. Dutch was afraid to, quote, die in the toilet, and still managed to drag himself out of the bathroom and collapsed at a table.
okay, he earned some points back in my book. Like,
He's not done. He was still alive when the medical team arrived, but they didn't have any pain relief to give him, so they basically just started pouring brandy down his throat until they got him to the hospital. Apparently, he slipped the medic $10,000 from his coat pocket to ensure that he got the best care possible, which is really funny to me. It's like having the Grim Reaper come to you and you slide him some money, like, make the seats good. You know? The guy supposedly left the money at the mobster's bedside because he was afraid that the gangster was going to recover and he didn't want to be in debt to fucking Dutch Schultz. Kind of understandable because the surgery initially seemed successful. Doctors thought he was going to be okay. What the doctors probably didn't realize was just how much damage the bullet had done despite missing the heart. And even if they recognized that damage, they probably didn't realize that the bullets the hitmen used, whether intentional or not, were covered in so much rust that it led to a definitely fatal infection in his bloodstream.
oh, that's usually tetanus, which is not a fun. I don't know if you've ever read about tetanus death, but
It's fucked up. Dutch's death is fucked up. And it's hard to tell how much is like fucking rust poisoning and how much of it is just way too much brandy and blood loss.
that's the thing too. Is it's like, yeah, I get the brandy, like it get you drunk and kind of numb the pain. It's awful for when you're bleeding because it fucks up your clotting and everything else.
At that point, I think the medics were like, just maybe it'll
he's
shut
dead
him
anyway.
out. Dutch lived for about 22 hours following his shooting, and from a blur of drugs, brandy, pain, and inevitability of death, he gave us some amazing last words, which I will now recite. A boy has never wept nor dashed 1,000 kin. You can play jacks, and girls do that with a softball and do tricks with it. Oh, dog biscuit, and when is happy, he doesn't get snappy. When asked who shot him, he said, the boss himself. Yes, I don't know. I am sore and I'm going up, and I'm going to give you honey if I can. Mother is the best bet, and don't let Satan draw you too fast. When asked why he was shot, him? John? Over $5 million. Come on, open the soap buckets. The chimney sweeps, talk to the sword. Shut up, you big mouth. Please help me up. French Canadian bean soup. I want to pay. Let them leave me alone. So drugs, brandy, rust poisoning, and a bullet to the chest, and you too can become a Joe Biden speech.
I was going to say, I like to think you're leading up to, like, that's how he was his whole life. He made no sense. He didn't mean to be a mobster. It's just nobody can tell what he's talking about.
In the world.
Yeah, it's he would just say stuff like, yeah, like puppy dog lollipop in a socking Christmas Eve, and people are like, "Oh my God, he's gonna take out the special prosecutor," and it's like not what he meant at all.
That's what's happening in the world, but in his mind, it's just like it's just a fucking carnival.
Yeah. So I have to take a guess, and this may be where you're going with it or not, maybe not, but I would imagine that these people that think that he's got buried money out there, I wonder how many of them like think that there's some hidden code in this like rambling.
Yep, you nailed it. That's how I found it initially. It's because people are like, could these words mean anything? And I'm reading them. I'm like, no, they don't mean shit.
No, it's very clear that he's just out of his gourd at that point.
But it was one of those things where like the ending of the story got me into the beginning of the story, and I actually liked reading about this dude's life. Like, it was very interesting. A lot of typical mob shit in there, but with, a lot of cool characters like Legs Diamond.
My favorites, and this is canon now, is that, what do we call him, Flinchy or whatever?
Jeffrey Jitters.
Jitters, yeah, the Jitters.
Yeah. I like him.
Flinchy's the guy that held the guy down.
Frankie Flinchy.
Yeah.
The two of them together can form one competent hitman.
They're basically Travolta and Jackson from Pulp Fiction.
I think we have, God damn it, we have another good fucking movie idea. Two fucking
it's a cross between Pulp Fiction and Dumb and Dumber.
Yeah.
No, it's these stories are interesting because you look at the history of these mobsters, and you can kind of go back and say like it never ended well for them, but you can clearly see where they went off the rails. And it's like, if you just kept your cool and weren't such a like impulsive, like anger management issues person, like you might have been able to live forever and just rule like this whole criminal underworld. But like so many of them have these blaring character flaws that are ultimately what bring them down. Like the Legs Diamond, like you said, feeling like you're bigger than anything. And
yeah,
but the violent anger one was a very, very common, because it's kind of a necessary ingredient to be a person like this.
Like, it's easy to point out and be like, there's these sticking points in all these stories where everything fell apart. And like I said, watch any mob movie, there's always that turning point event where everything falls apart for him. But the thing is, like, we all have those like moments where we're at our worst selves and shit in our life takes a swing. The difference between us and mobsters is we don't have everything at stake based off of how we react to like one event. When you're in that mobster world, you're putting your life on the line every fucking day with every move you make. Like,
and I think they all have that
out.
And I think they all have that thing that Legs had, where you get to this point where you've got away with it so many times that you kind of start to forget that there could be consequences, and you think that there won't be ever.
Yeah.
But there are, you look at criminals and mobsters, and even, there are ones that were like calculating enough and had it together enough to whatever, and those are the truly terrifying ones. Cause
they like, those are the people who did it. Like, there's the guys who like got excited by this life and needed it, and they usually died pretty quick. The guys who were literally like matter-of-factly, this is business, and didn't like, who could just coldly acknowledge murder, well, we call those people billionaires now. But it's that mentality of just like, it's just business that's like so fucking inhumane and scary that it's like, we like these mob stories about these guys who get seduced by the life, but there are definitely those figures who just got seduced by how much money you can make and didn't really care like the cost of it.
I mean, they're kind of, some of them are the exact same mental makeup as a lot of these serial killers, where like if you literally have no qualms about murdering somebody, like it doesn't affect you in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
that leaves very little holding you back. So
yeah. So
those
like
are
the guys who are
ones,
just like violent fucking children, they're scary in their own way. But the guys who handle this shit like adults, that's more terrifying, because that means you rationalized all the evil shit you did.
Right.
Which takes an especially broken brain. So,
and like I say, they tend to get away with it a lot longer. Now, they still tend to, I mean, look at one of the most famous ones, at least modern times, the Whitey Bulger, where he got away with it forever. And my understanding, he was pretty much out of the criminal. He wasn't continuing criminal operations. It was, I think, he had been out of it for decades and thought, I'm scot-free, and they were still looking for him. And
he was on the run. So it wasn't like he just dropped his whole criminal thing. It was like he had to, or he would go to jail.
Well, right. But he eventually still got caught, but he was one that was obviously a little more measured, because he was smart enough to be like, well, fuck, I need to cut this out and hit the road with all my money. Like, but,
he was a weird one.
Yeah.
Like if you ever watch that movie Black Mass, like, kind of a weird movie. They make Johnny Depp look like a ghoul.
It was weird. He reminded me of kind of like the one episode of that, what's it called? I think you can leave, or you can leave, whatever. I'm wearing too much shit.
Oh yeah. Carl Havoc.
It's like
it's too much fucking shit on me.
Like you could plop him into Johnny Depp's role in that movie, and I don't know that anybody would notice. Like, that was such a weird decision.
Yeah.
And we've talked about it on the show. Like, they did that to Depp, and then they didn't even make him look like Whitey Bulger.
Yeah, it wasn't to look like Whitey. Like, I believe it started that way. And the makeup guy's like, I can't do this. This is Johnny Depp. This is going to be clearly Johnny Depp, unless I make him a monster. And so that's
and he ended up basically just looking. If anybody, I thought he looked like Mike Pence, but
there's like a little bit of like fucking Freddy Krueger in there.
Yeah,
it's a weird makeup job, but yeah, like Whitey Bulger, I actually think he was more hot-headed than some of the guys we're talking about. He just kind of lucked into this fucked up situation where his connections in the FBI let him get away with a lot more shit for a lot longer. So that was kind of a special case.
And that's where a lot of Americans' distrust for these organizations stems from. Is we talked about that. It was one of mine. I can't think of the guy's name. The one out of Cleveland that blew up everybody with car bombs, the Irish guy, Danny Green. But how long he was allowed to continue murdering people and running his criminal operations because the FBI wanted to use him as an informant against other mobsters. And it's like, well, how about you just take the guy that you know is murdering people and stop him from doing that? But, so yeah, I guess that kind of.
Yeah. But it depends. Like, it depends. Every mobster has a little bit of a different story and goes through phases where they can play, keep cool, to quote our favorite gunman today. And then there are others who never could keep it cool. So that's the show this week. I have nothing more to say for myself, but we'll have more to say another week.
Yeah, sounds good.
That's a plan. That's a plan you can set your watch to.
It's a solid plan.
Do people set watches anymore? I'm old.
I don't know. I have a smartwatch, but it sets itself.
I have to. My watch isn't a smartwatch. Because what the fuck? I don't want a smartwatch.
It was a. Yeah, mine's more of a GED watch. It was like a $40 Samsung thing. It's not like a Apple Watch or something. It does minimal smart things, but it is Bluetooth with my phone, and that's where it gets the time from. So.
I like my watches dumb as hell, just like me. All right, we're done. Thanks for listening. See you next week.
Yeah.